They say betrayal doesn't come from enemies, and I guess I learned that lesson the hard way. I never imagined the woman I loved most, the woman I built my world with, would be the one to tear it all down. People look at me now and they think I'm strong, cold even. But they didn't see me when I was standing alone in an empty office, staring at the company sign that used to bear my name. They didn't see the way my hands trembled when the security guard asked me, politely, almost embarrassed, to hand over my badge and leave the premises of the company I had built from scratch. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began. Her name was Elise. She had this quiet magnetism. Not the kind of beauty that turns heads in the street, but the kind that slowly seeps under your skin. She was sharp, ambitious, and laughed in a way that made you want to be the reason behind it. We met during a tech conference in Seattle. I was there presenting a prototype, an early version of what would later become the core technology behind our company. She was working PR for a mid-sized firm, wearing a navy blue suit and a look like she already knew she was 5 steps ahead of you. We talked for 3 hours that day. Not about love, not even about tech, about drive, about dreams, about what we hated most about mediocrity. 6 months later, we were living together. A year later, we were married. People say business and love don't mix. I believed differently. I thought when 2 people shared a dream, nothing could break them. So when I decided to finally leave my job and launch my startup, there was never a question in my mind. Elise would be my co-founder. The company grew fast. Our core product was a piece of proprietary software that could analyze consumer behavior and personalize digital experiences in real time, something that big retailers were desperate for. I had designed the architecture, written the first 100,000 lines of code, and registered the patent under my own name, on advice from a mentor who told me, always protect your IP, no matter how much you trust someone. But I didn't think I'd ever need that protection. Not from her. Elise was brilliant in ways I wasn't. She understood branding, marketing, and how to make a pitch room fall in love. Investors adored her. Media loved her. She had this way of turning cold analytics into something poetic. Together, we were unstoppable, or so I thought. The first sign that something was off came subtle. It was during a board meeting when a major investor congratulated Elise on the innovation behind our core algorithm. She smiled, nodded, accepted the compliment. She didn't correct him, didn't mention my name. It stung, but I brushed it off. I thought, she's under pressure. It's just a slip. Then the meetings started happening without me. At first they were just investor updates. Then there were lunches I wasn't invited to. Strategy calls that didn't require my technical insight. I was still doing 16-hour days, still optimizing the product, still burning out to meet deadlines. But slowly, subtly, I was being pushed out of the narrative. And then came the ambush. It was supposed to be a routine quarterly board review. Elise walked in that morning looking calm, almost serene. Her hair was pulled back, her makeup light but perfect. She kissed me on the cheek like nothing was wrong. When the meeting started, the room felt different, colder. And then, one of the board members, a man who used to call me genius, cleared his throat and said the words, "I'll never forget. We think it's in the company's best interest if you step down as CEO." I laughed. I thought it was a joke. Elise didn't laugh. She looked at me and said, "It's not personal. You've always been the builder. But we need a leader who can scale us to the next level." I was too stunned to speak. They had papers, ready, a generous severance package, NDAs, a statement for the press. Everything was prepped. I wasn't supposed to resist. Just sign and walk away. I looked at Elise, searching her face for some sign of conflict, a flicker of guilt. Nothing. Just polished calm. I didn't fight that day. I don't know if it was shock, heartbreak, or the sheer exhaustion of trying to process it all. I just nodded, stood up, and left. It was raining outside. Fitting, I suppose. I drove aimlessly for hours. Ended up in front of my old apartment, the one bedroom I lived in before I met her. I sat there in silence, listening to the rain thud against the windshield. My phone buzzed with texts I didn't read, emails I couldn't bear to open, but somewhere in that stillness, I remembered something. The patent, that single sheet of paper sitting in my home safe. The one thing I had done without her. The core algorithm, the very thing the company was built on, was still mine. Legally, irrefutably. And she didn't know. Not yet. I didn't smile. I didn't laugh. I just sat there, letting the realization settle in my bones. For the first time in days, I felt still. They had taken everything. My title, my shares, my pride. But they forgot one thing. The soul of the company still belonged to me, and I wasn't going to waste that fact. Not yet. The days after my removal were quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. Like a song that ends abruptly, leaving only silence in its wake. I went through the motions, brushing my teeth, making coffee, walking to clear my head. But nothing felt real. I kept replaying that moment in the boardroom, her voice calm as ever, saying, "It's not personal." But it was, and we both knew it. I didn't go public, didn't make noise. I didn't want pity, and I didn't need attention. I just watched, observed, stayed in the shadows while Elise moved center stage. She gave interviews, sat on panels. She was the new face of the company we built together, and no one knew the man behind the curtain was the same man they'd pushed out. I started keeping a journal again, not out of habit, but because I needed to hold on to something real, something that wasn't sculpted for PR or shareholder meetings. I wrote down every change I noticed, new hires, shifting marketing language, their attempt to pivot the tech into a SaaS platform. They were trying to scale fast, too fast. They were leaning on the tech, building everything around it, around my code. It was strange. Part of me felt numb. Another part of me, it was waiting. But I wasn't ready yet. There's something sacred about silence when you know you're the only one in the room who holds the truth. I didn't want to waste it on petty revenge. And then, one night, about 3 weeks after I walked out of that building, I got a call. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Hey, it's me, Elise." Her voice cracked just slightly on the me, like she wasn't sure what role she was supposed to play. I said nothing, just waited. I know this is awkward, but can we meet? Just to talk. I could have said no, could have hung up, but curiosity's a strange thing. It doesn't always obey pride. So I agreed. We met at this little cafe on 11th Street, the one we used to go to when we were broke and hopeful, splitting black coffee and cinnamon rolls. She looked different now, polished, colder. But her smile, it was the same, practiced, familiar, empty. She talked first, said she was sorry for how things went down, that it wasn't her decision alone, that the board felt I was too emotionally tied to the product, and they needed a fresh direction. "I tried to fight for you," she said softly, looking down at her cup. I almost laughed, but I didn't. I just nodded and listened. She went on, talking about how hard it's been, how investors were putting pressure on her, how the product roadmap was hitting bumps. And then the question I knew was coming. "Do you still have the original source files, the early architecture drafts?" I sipped my coffee, looked her in the eyes. "You mean the ones I coded before the company even existed?" She hesitated, just for a second, then smiled. "Yeah, those." And that's when I knew. They didn't have them, or at least not in full. My guess was they'd tried to recreate it, build around it, but without the core framework, it was unstable. Maybe they'd even begun to realize they couldn't scale without breaking the system. that without my code, they were selling an empty shell. I didn't answer her question. I just said, "Why do you really want to talk, Elise?" She faltered. For the first time in years, I saw the mask slip. "I miss you." I blinked. "You miss me, or you miss what I can do for you?" Silence. Her eyes dropped. Her hands trembled just slightly as she reached for the sugar. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. After a long pause, she looked up. Maybe I made a mistake. There it was, the seed of guilt, or maybe manipulation. With Elise, it was always hard to tell. She was crying now. Quiet tears, the kind that don't make a scene but pierce more deeply. And I felt something stir. Not anger, not even revenge, just this quiet ache. We were married 5 years, built a life together, shared plans, memories, Sunday morning routines. And yet, here we were, two strangers on opposite sides of a lie. I left that cafe without giving her what she came for. I didn't offer help, didn't threaten her either. I just said I needed time. In truth, I already knew what I was going to do. I just needed to be patient. Still, that night, I pulled out the patent documents, the original code registry, the time-stamped commits. Everything was in order, clean, protected. Mine. They could use it up to a point. But beyond that, any attempt to commercialize or license the platform without my permission was an infringement, and I had the receipts. The next few days, I consulted a quiet lawyer friend, not a bulldog, just someone smart, discreet. I didn't want to burn the company down. Not yet. I wanted to see what Elise would do. Now that she suspected, I still had something she needed. And sure enough, 3 days later, I got an email, not from her, from the company's new CTO, a man I'd never met, very formal, very professional. He asked if I'd be willing to discuss technical collaboration on the evolving version of the product, said they valued my insight and would be open to a consulting arrangement. A consulting arrangement for a company I created. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I went to the company's website, watched one of Elise's most recent interviews. She looked stunning. Spoke with that soft confidence people fall for. She said things like, "We built this, and our vision from the beginning, and the proprietary system we designed. Every word a knife, but now I had the handle, and I wasn't done sharpening it." There's something strange about watching your own creation from the outside. I used to walk through those office halls knowing every corner, every face, every flaw in the system, and how to fix it. Now, I was just another spectator. I read about the company in press releases. I heard whispers in tech circles, how the software had unmatched potential, but some instability under pressure. They were hitting walls, and they didn't understand why. They didn't know that the foundation they were building on wasn't made to be shared. Not like that. But still, I waited. I wasn't ready to make my move, not until I knew exactly what Elise wanted and how far she'd go to get it, and she was getting bolder. 2 weeks after that cafe meeting, she invited me to dinner. No email, no formal tone this time, just a message on my old phone number, still saved as Eli in her contacts, probably out of habit or oversight. Dinner, just us, for real this time. I should have said no. I knew what she was doing. I knew the look she'd wear, the softness in her eyes, the way her fingers would linger on the wine glass, the carefully curated vulnerability. But I went. Maybe I needed to see it one last time. She booked a private room at a quiet Italian place. We used to celebrate it when things were still good. It was surreal, like walking into a memory someone had edited. She was already seated when I arrived, swirling her wine slowly, like time didn't touch her anymore. She looked up, smiled. The same smile I once swore I'd never get tired of. "You look good," she said, her voice quiet. I didn't return the compliment. She got to the point faster this time. I need your help. There it was. No tears, no games. Just need. Desperation wrapped in grace. She explained how the platform wasn't scaling as expected. Clients were complaining. The algorithm wasn't adapting properly in real time. Their engineers had tried to patch it, build modules around it, even rewrite certain layers. But the deeper they went, the more unstable it became. I listened. Slowly, quietly. I watched her hands, steady now, professional. We want to bring you in, she said. Not just consulting. A full return. I looked at her. You mean after kicking me out? After having security escort me like a stranger? Her mouth opened slightly. I didn't want that. The board followed your lead. Elise, don't lie to me. Silence. She looked away. Then said something I wasn't expecting. I didn't want to share you with the company anymore. It felt like I was losing you. To your work, to your pride, to everything we built. I didn't know how to fix that. Except to take control of it. There was honesty in her voice this time. Not innocence. Just honesty. Raw. Flawed. And for a second, I saw the woman I married. Not the one who betrayed me, but the one who used to fall asleep on the couch next to me while I coded late into the night. But still, I trusted you, I said. More than anyone. And you buried me alive. She looked down, her voice small. I know. I let that hang in the air. Then I said something she didn't expect either. I'll think about it. She looked up, hope blooming too fast in her eyes. But, I added, this time I don't come back under you. I don't answer to your board. I own the code, the patent, the algorithm. If I come back, it's as the architect, the rightful owner, full control of the product. Her smile faded just slightly. That's going to be a hard sell. I leaned in. Then don't waste my time. I left before dessert. Back in my apartment, I stared at the ceiling for a long time. What she said kept playing in my head. I didn't want to share you with the company anymore. Maybe it was true. Maybe it wasn't. But I didn't care. This wasn't about love anymore. Not the romantic kind anyway. This was about dignity. About making peace with a version of myself that had been too trusting for too long. The next morning, I got a call. Elise, again. She said the board was open to negotiations, that they were considering the idea of restructuring the product division with me at the head, that they were even willing to reinstate part of my equity stake. I didn't respond right. Away. I told her I needed everything in writing, all terms, all details. 2 days later, a legal draft arrived in my inbox. I read it carefully. They were offering me a seat on the executive team, control over the product, a chance to co-lead innovation with the current CTO, and a 10% equity reinstatement. It was tempting, neatly packaged, professional, but it was also insulting, because they still didn't get it. This wasn't a negotiation, this was a countdown, and the clock had been ticking since the day they threw me out of my own company. I sent a short reply. Thank you for the offer. I'll respond. Soon. In the meantime, I suggest your legal counsel review patent 88735XBR, specifically the clauses regarding licensing violations and intellectual property misuse. That was all I wrote. I sent it at 11:47 p.m. By 6 a.m., I had 6 missed calls from Elise, 3 from the new CTO. I didn't pick up, because for the first time since it all happened, I wasn't the one scrambling anymore. They were. I didn't sleep much in the days after sending that email, not because I was afraid, but because something inside me had begun to stir. Not anger, just a kind of stillness that only comes when you know something is about to change, like the air before a storm. And this time, I was the one holding the reins. Elise didn't reply right away, but I knew she'd read it. I pictured the moment she sat at her desk, eyes fixed on the screen as the words patent infringement sunk in. No threats, no yelling, just truth and proof. Then a message came. Can we talk? Cold, short, no question mark, no apology. Didn't respond. I left it there. I wanted her to sit with it. Every hour that passed, I knew it was gnawing at her, not because I was her ex-husband, but because I was the one loose end she thought she'd tied up, and now it was unraveling. 3 days later, the company's legal representative reached out. Polite wording, cautious tone. They claimed they were reviewing the scope of early-stage IP and that there may have been unintentional overlap. They wanted a conversation, a peaceful solution. I forwarded it to my lawyer, an old friend, quiet, precise, and immune to charm. I told him, I don't want to sue, not yet. He raised an eyebrow. Then what do you want? I leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. I want them to need me. And so, I began placing the pieces. I reached out to 2 of our very first angel investors, people who backed me when the company was still just notes on a napkin. They remembered me. They also remembered the quiet way Elise had shut me out of the boardroom. They said, we always knew something wasn't right. But back then, you didn't speak up. I nodded. Because this is when it matters. At the same time, I started reconnecting with the engineers who helped build the original product, those who understood the tech as deeply as I did. Some had been quietly let go. Others had walked away when the culture shifted. But they still believed, not in the old company, in the idea, in the thing we created together. We started rebuilding, from the ground up. No copying, no shortcuts. A brand new version, cleaner, faster, smarter. I called the project Echo, because I didn't want to shout, just let the truth echo loud enough on its own. Meanwhile, Elise kept trying to steady the ship. She made a few press appearances, talked about internal breakthroughs and AI innovation, but her voice, it wasn't as steady. Her smile, a little too tight. I could tell. She knew the ground was shifting beneath her. Then came another email. Subject: let's meet. Just you and me. No assistant. No lawyers. Just us. She chose a quiet cafe, the same one where we once brainstormed the first beta version. I agreed, not out of nostalgia, but because I wanted to look her in the eyes one last time and watch her admit what I had buried for too long. She arrived before me. Same black heels, crisp white blouse, but something had changed. The confidence was gone. She started without waiting. You know I didn't mean to take everything, she said. I didn't respond, just watched. Elise, I said after a long silence. You didn't just take everything we built. You took everything I trusted you with. But you forgot. The one thing you never really understood was the one thing you couldn't steal. She nodded slightly, lips pressed together. Not because she disagreed, because she knew it was true. I can put you back on the board, she offered. Title, equity, rebuild the contract, as long as you stop all this. I sipped my coffee, didn't blink. No, she blinked instead. That was the first time I'd seen her thrown off. You don't want to be CEO again. I gave a faint smile. No, Elise. I don't want to return to a place that once threw me out like a stranger. I want to build something new where no one can ever take anything from me again. I stood up. And this time, I'm not building it with you. I walked out, leaving her alone at that little table, coffee untouched, hands motionless. That wasn't revenge. That was the ending. But deep down, we both knew the real blow hadn't landed yet. The funny thing about power is, when people think they've taken it from you, they stop looking over their shoulder. That's what Elise did. She believed the silence meant I'd given up, that the storm had passed, that the man she pushed out, discarded, humiliated, was no longer a threat. But silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's just the deep breath before the blow. And now, it was time. The first blow wasn't loud. It didn't make headlines. It came as a quiet letter, delivered through my attorney to hers. A cease and desist. It wasn't hostile, just factual, detailed, methodical. It outlined the patent, the violation, the specific clauses breached by the continued use and commercialization of my original code. We attached logs, commits, licensing terms, watermarks embedded in the early framework, tiny fragments of code that identified me as the creator, invisible to users but irrefutable to experts. We gave them 10 business days, not to destroy anything, not to apologize, just to stop, to halt. Deployment. Remove all software using the disputed algorithm, cease sale or licensing, and provide a full record of profits tied to the intellectual property in question. A friend of mine, quietly embedded in their ops team, told me Elise went pale when she read it. No shouting, no throwing things, just a stunned silence. She knew it wasn't bluster, and that was the real sting, because in her world, emotion could be dismissed. But evidence, cold, legal, surgical, was something else entirely. Within 48 hours, I got a response. Their legal team wanted to open a dialogue. They proposed a mediation process, a shared audit, mutual goodwill. I read the words, then set them aside. They were already losing, and I hadn't even stepped into court. What happened next? That was never in the plan. I didn't expect Elise to call me again, but she did, late, almost midnight. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying, but wasn't going to give me the satisfaction of hearing it. "You've made your point," she said. I said nothing. "Can we meet? One last time." I didn't want to. Every part of me wanted to say no, but another part, the one still haunted by the years we shared, the life we built, agreed. Maybe I needed closure more than I admitted. We met at the rooftop of an old hotel downtown. It used to be our escape when we needed air, when the weight of building something from nothing got too heavy. We'd sit there and look out at the city, dreaming of someday. Now we stood there, silent. She broke it first. "You planned this, didn't you?" Her voice wasn't angry, just hollow. "No," I said. "But once you made your move, I made mine." She nodded slowly, folding her arms like she was holding herself together. Then she looked at me, really looked. "I didn't think you had it in you. That hurt more than I thought it would." "You never saw me clearly," I replied. "Not really. You saw the version of me that was useful, not the one that could stand on his own." She didn't deny it. Instead, she asked the question that really mattered. "What do you want?" I looked at her, the city lights flickering behind her, her makeup slightly smudged, her confidence cracked just enough to show the human beneath. And I told her the truth. I want the company back. Not as a partner, not as a consultant, as its rightful owner. Her jaw tightened. "I rebuilt that company when you walked away." "No," I said quietly. "You dressed it up, you painted over it, but the bones are still mine. You stole the house, Elise, but you forgot who laid the foundation." Silence again. I could feel the weight of everything between us pressing into the space where love used to live. Then, almost whispering, she said, "If I give it up, what happens to me?" I paused, because that was the question I didn't expect her to ask. And for a moment, I saw the person I once loved, not the CEO, not the strategist, just the girl I met in Seattle, whose dreams once aligned with mine. So I answered honestly, "You walk away with your reputation intact. No lawsuits, no press. You keep your personal assets. You move on. Clean slate." She studied me like she didn't trust the kindness. "You'd really let me go?" I shrugged. "You already did." We didn't say much after that. She asked for a few days to think. I gave her 3. And during those 3 days, I moved. Quietly. Strategically. I finalized talks with the early investors, secured funding for Project Echo, now rebranded under a new name, registered, trademarked, patented. We were ready. But Elise surprised me again. On the fourth day, I received an email. Subject, transfer of assets. Proposal, it was short, simple, and at the bottom of the email she signed, "For what it's worth, I did love you." I didn't reply. Because what we had, that version of us, it was gone. But the empire she tried to claim, that was mine again. And the world would know it. Soon. It wasn't revenge I wanted. Not really. What I wanted was clarity. I wanted the people who looked me in the eyes while stabbing me in the back to finally see who I was, without the noise, without the narrative Elise fed them. And now, I had that chance. She'd given it to me herself. The transition didn't happen overnight. She negotiated the exit with her usual poise. Publicly, it was framed as a personal decision to step away for health and family reasons. No scandal, no public shaming, just a clean withdrawal. But inside, she was unraveling. I didn't see it at first. I assumed she'd land on her feet, spin the story like she always did. But it turns out, stepping down without the safety net of control terrified her. And as the days passed, I started hearing things, whispers from mutual contacts. "She's been staying out of sight lately." Elise skipped a major industry panel. First time in years. "She looks tired." I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't even feel pity. I just felt done. While Elise disappeared into the background, I stepped back into the light. Not loudly, not with spectacle, just with purpose. Our rebranded company launched under a new name, Nova Trace. No press tour, no major reveal. Just a quiet product demo streamed online, showing the new version of our software in action. Real-time data adaptation, machine learning at scale. Clean, elegant, powerful. It went viral within 48 hours. Not because of flashy marketing, but because the industry recognized what it was: innovation. And in the flood of attention, comparisons started. Tech blogs, reviewers, former clients, they started putting the pieces together. NovaTrace seems oddly familiar to Elise's company's original product, only cleaner. Could the original creator be behind this new launch? I never answered. I never confirmed. But I also didn't hide. Within a week, 3 of Elise's biggest clients had reached out. One of them outright cancelled their renewal, citing technical concerns. I knew what that meant. They knew who built the original engine and who held the key to its future. The last domino fell at a conference in Austin. It was supposed to be Elise's big moment. She was still listed as a guest speaker on the panel, but when the organizers found out she had stepped away, they replaced her with me. I didn't ask for it. I didn't even know until the night before. But there it was. My name on the roster, my face on the brochure. I stood on that stage, looking out at the same industry faces who'd once praised her. The ones who'd believed the story she told about being the visionary behind it all. I didn't gloat. I didn't mention her name. I just talked about innovation, the journey, the code, the belief that good ideas can't be buried forever. When the session ended, there was a pause, a long silence, then applause. And it wasn't polite. It was real. Later that evening, as I stood at the back of the venue sipping a drink, a familiar voice behind me said quietly, "You won." I turned. Elise stood there. No bodyguards, no polished speech, just her. Hair pulled back, no makeup, smaller somehow, not defeated, just stripped down. "Was that what this was all for?" she asked. "To humiliate me?" I shook my head. "It was never about humiliating you, Elise. It was about undoing what you did." She looked at me, eyes glassy, and for the first time, she didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She just nodded. And then, almost too quietly to hear, she said, "I didn't think you'd come back from it." I smiled. Not out of pride, just truth. I didn't come back. I built something new. She closed her eyes, just for a moment, then said, "So what happens now? Now?" Now the world forgets the lie, I thought. But I didn't say it. I just replied, "Now I run the company, and you go find your next story." She didn't cry. She didn't plead. She just walked away, and that was the last time I saw her, but not the last time I heard about her. Over the next few weeks, she tried to find a footing again, a consulting gig here, a podcast interview there, but the industry remembered, quietly, unforgivingly. They didn't blacklist her. They just moved on, without her. Meanwhile, Novatrace secured 2 major funding rounds in less than 6 months. We expanded the product to new sectors: education, logistics, real-time decision platforms. We weren't chasing her shadow anymore. We were casting our own. One night, months later, I found myself sitting alone in the same cafe where Elise had asked for the old code, the seat by the window, the place where I'd first started to reclaim my name. A waitress walked over. Young, polite. "You come here a lot," she said. I nodded. "Must be nice," she added, "to work on something you love that much." I paused, then smiled. I didn't just work on it, I got it back. They say closure isn't a door that slams shut. It's a quiet click, no ceremony, no spotlight. Just the soft sound of something finally settling in place. That's what it felt like in the months after everything ended. Not just Elise's reign at the company, not just the lawsuit that never had to be filed, but the whole story, the betrayal, the silence, the slow, methodical climb back to something I could call mine. Novatrace was doing well, better than well actually. What started as a whispered comeback became a storm. The product wasn't just solid, it was respected. Clients praised its adaptability, the speed, the humanity baked into the data. Investors no longer asked about Elise or the drama of the past. They wanted to know about roadmaps, expansion, licensing deals. I was back in control. But more than that, I was back on my own terms. The strange part? There were no parades, no confetti, just quiet evenings at the office, working late with my team. People who believed in the product because they believed in me. And that was enough. But healing doesn't always look like progress charts and product launches. Sometimes it looks like sitting alone on a park bench and realizing you're no longer angry, that the heat that once sat in your chest like a live wire has gone cold. I had that moment one morning in late fall. The leaves were turning. My coffee was still warm. And I realized I hadn't thought about Elise in weeks. Not with bitterness, not with longing, just nothing. And that, oddly, was the greatest freedom. I didn't need revenge anymore. I didn't need her to hurt, or to regret, or to see me succeed, because I had already succeeded. There was a kind of poetry in the way things unfolded. Elise didn't vanish from the world. She rebranded, slowly, started a boutique consulting firm, pivoted to women in tech advocacy. She was smart. She always had been. And despite everything, I didn't want to see her destroyed. I just wanted her gone from my story. And now she was. One afternoon, I found myself walking through the building that used to be ours, the old office, long since vacated. Novatrace had moved to a new campus, something fresh and open and filled with light. But I walked those halls one more time anyway. I stopped by the old corner office. Mine once, and then not, and now. Just an empty room. I stood there for a while, breathing in the dust and the quiet, and thought about how much time I'd spent letting this space define me, my worth. My voice. Now it was just drywall and memory, and outside of it, I had something better. A future. Before I left, I walked over to where the old company name used to hang, etched into the glass. The name Elise fought to keep. It was gone, now. Just a smudge where the letters used to be. I smiled. Not because she lost, but because I'd finally stopped trying to win against her. The next week, we launched Novatrace's mentorship initiative. It wasn't flashy, we didn't do it for PR, but it mattered to me. We offered guidance, funding, and technical training for young developers who didn't come from privilege, who'd been overlooked, just like I had been once. We called the program Foundation, and maybe that's what this whole journey had really been about. Not reclaiming power, not even reclaiming a company, but rebuilding the foundation under my feet. One night, during a Q&A at a university guest lecture, a student asked me, "What's the biggest lesson you've learned from your success?" I paused, then said, "That no one can truly steal what you've built with your own hands. Not if you remember who you are underneath it all." They nodded, took notes. But I wasn't saying it for them. I was saying it for the version of me that once sat in a car outside the old apartment, wondering how everything had fallen apart. That man had no idea what was waiting on the other side of silence. And maybe that's the last thing I'll say about all this. Sometimes the best revenge is surviving long enough to no longer need it.